Welcome to the Dansports.tips NFL preview show. We're looking at the NFC North, the Chicago Bears, the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings. This is a division that has made the news in recent days, but I'm not going to start in the obvious place. I am a Chicago Bears fan. I'm going to start with the Chicago Bears. The Bears have had a makeover at linebacker this year. They brought in Jarrell Freeman, the best linebacker from the Indianapolis Colts, Danny Trevathan from the Denver Broncos, the Super Bowl champions, respectively, along with draft pick Leonard Floyd to add to the likes of Pernell McPhee, Willie Young, Lamar Houston. This looks like the front seven is taking shape now, consists of both quality and depth for a Bears defensive unit that's been disastrous for a number of years and should hopefully put to rest horrific memories such as John Bostic and Shane McClellan flailing around, not accomplishing much of any note during their time on the field at Soldier Field. The front seven will certainly need to perform against the pass, gaining pressure as the back end still looks potentially suspect. I am a Kyle Fuller fan. He was pretty damn poor in his rookie year, but he did look like he was getting it last year. And in the first preseason game, I thought he looked like he may have taken another step. Then, of course, injury struck. He hopes to be ready for week one. He should be back early in the year any which way. The safety position is still a work in progress, but it can't be worse than Chris Conte and Major Wright a few years ago. This defense was appalling overall and an absolute horror show against the run last year. It simply cannot be worse, and it is likely to be quite a bit better than last year. On offense, the biggest loss is Adam Gase, the offensive coordinator, who got one of the best seasons we've seen out of Jay Cutler in many a year, and was so well regarded with his work with number 6 that he got the head coaching gig in Miami. Martellus Bennett has left town with some harsh words for Cutler and gone to play second fiddle to Gronk in New England, while Matt Forte was wished all the best and not renewed and is now a New York Jet. There are lots of areas on the offense that are difficult to project. Is Jeremy Langford going to be able to get the job done as a lead running back? If he isn't, is some form of committee with Kadeem Carey and Jordan Howard good enough? That's unlikely. Can Alshon Jeffrey stay healthy? And what will Kevin White do when the real games start? Decent training camp and pre-season performances are one thing, but he likely needs Alshon Jeffrey healthy to succeed, you would think. And the enigmatic Cutler, how is he going to do now that Gase has left town? Does he regress to the old gunslinger that throws it around with reckless abandon? Only in Chicago could the all-time passing leader be as polarising as Jay Cutler. I hate to say it, but I think the offense is going to be worse. I think the defense will be better. I don't think the team has done enough to be better overall, and it looks somewhere between 5 and 7 wins for Chicago this year, and probably the end of the Cutler experience at season's end, because I think it's the end of this year where they can finally cut ties with him without a catastrophic cap hit, and I think the Bears will be in full rebuild mode on offense at the end of this season. The Detroit Lions, so one of the best wide receivers in the league has retired in Calvin Johnson. That's not good. It's probably the main storyline when it comes to Detroit this year, but it isn't where I'm going to start. 2 years ago, this defense was one of the best in the NFL. It was number 1 against the run that year. It was obviously going to change as the entire interior defensive line moved on when both Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley left town. Add to that a string of injuries on the defensive side of the ball last year, and the Lions collapsed. DeAndre Levy will be back this year and will make a huge difference to the linebacker core that is going to need it if they intend on playing John Bostic with any sort of regularity, though Haloti Ngata and Ziggy Ansah provide a solid front, and the secondary led by Glover Quinn suggests that at least the starters, this unit looks primed for a rebound from last year's performance levels. The offense was a tale of two halves last year, showing huge improvement following their bye week and the installation of Jim Bob Cooter's offense when they made the change at offensive coordinator. It's difficult to say whether this was schedule driven, as the opening games to the Lions last year were far from a cakewalk, or a product of the change in scheme. Such a reduction in risk with the passing, they took out some of the routes that the receivers were running, reduced turnovers. Was that the scheme? Was it the schedule? I guess this is the year we find out. This team is better both rushing and passing with Cooter running the show, and despite the departure of Megatron, the offense still has chances to be successful this year. Golden Tate is a solid receiver. The pairing with Marvin Jones in from Cincinnati actually isn't that bad, and a better 1-2 than quite a few teams in this league can boast. Potentially the second best unit in the division. Depends on what you think of Kevin White and whether you trust Alshon Jeffrey's health. They will need to get increased production from the running back position. Joik Bell is gone. The tandem of Zach Zenner and Amir Abdullah will be in control of rushing the ball. the later having shown flashes of obvious big play potential, but without any form of consistency last year. Ultimately, this roster does lack depth, as evidenced by the presence of players such as Bostic, and will need to remain much healthier than they did last year, but the second half of last year isn't a mirage on offence, in my opinion. And I think it's fairly reasonable to expect defensive improvement back towards and maybe slightly above the league average. With the NFC East and the AFC South on the schedule this year, the schedule has been kind to the teams in the NFC North. This team will have a strong idea of where they stand early on in the season, with 3 of their first 4 games taking place on the road. The Green Bay Packers. The Packers were reduced in effectiveness last year before a competitive down was played. Randall Cobb and Davante Adams, the great hopes as the next big thing at receiver for the Pack, were shown up as men who couldn't get the job done, as none of the receivers were able to separate from defensive backs with alarming regularity after Jordy Nelson wasn't on the field, being lost to injury in the pre-season. When you add in the regression of the run game and Eddie Lacy's apparent regular trips to the delicatessen, then it's absolutely a miracle that Aaron Rodgers dragged this offense anywhere near being competitive. That being said, the year he missed games and with the collarbone injury, and they trotted out Scott Tolzien, Seneca Wallace at quarterback, and I think Matt Flynn got some starts as well. They stayed competitive that year and played in the postseason. Unfair as it is, the Green Bay Packers find a way to remain competitive every year. Jordy Nelson is now back. That's going to help this offense be productive. They're not going to have to rely on Cobb and Davante Adams to get the job done. They'll play second fiddle to Jordy Nelson. They should be able to sustain point-scoring drives better. Everything you hear say Lacey's turned up in good condition and is ready to play some ball, though it's not the first time we've heard that. And that alone will keep the Packers in the thick of things, certainly with an easier schedule than the Vikings, as they get Seattle at home and Atlanta on the road amongst their second-place schedule. The defence has lost nose tackle BJ Raji, who isn't necessarily as productive as his reputation established in the Super Bowl run. Casey Hayward has gone to San Diego. That does weaken the secondary, but the intention to play Clay Matthews back on the outside rather than as an inside linebacker should increase his effectiveness in this defensive unit and use him in his best role as simply pressuring the quarterback. Inside linebacker is a hole, and as such they do struggle against the run and will probably continue to do so. But if a game develops into a shootout, you would be hard pressed to find an offense that you would rather have with the ball in their hands. They are right there in this division race and rightful favourites. How the defence grows throughout the year will dictate how far they can go in the postseason. And that brings me to the big story and the reigning division champion Minnesota Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater. Firstly, let's hope that Bridgewater is able to come back from what sounded a particularly nasty knee injury to resume his football career. Now that I've got that out of the way, he isn't the key to this offense. Adrian Peterson holds the keys to the Minnesota Vikings. Teddy Bridgewater did not throw deep last year, was basically a game manager of the Vikings while teams loaded the box to try and in the main failed to stop the generational talent at running back in Adrian Peterson. This is why the Bradford trade exists. Adrian Peterson is 31 years old, and the clock on his, and as it stands, the Vikings window is ticking and ticking loudly. The Vikings won the division last year on the basis of good defensive play, solid but unspectacular quarterback play, eliminating risk and mistakes, and handing the ball off to the best running back in the league. Sam Bradford enables them to continue on the same tracks until the time that Bridgewater is ready to come back. Can the Vikings win a Super Bowl with Bradford? Probably not. Could they win a Super Bowl with Teddy Bridgewater? Probably not, with the game plan that they were sensibly using anyway. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't a shot at Mike Zimmer. He's a coach I'm a huge fan of. I was clamouring for many a year for him to get a head coaching gig while he repeatedly worked wonders with the Cincinnati Bengals defence. But the press have to write their headlines. Teddy's injury was not as catastrophic for the hopes of this team and really doesn't change the outlook an awful lot with Bradford in the building. Sean Hill, maybe it would have done, but that's a different matter. He will start week 1 and then Bradford will take over. The offensive line will be better. This will enable the Vikes to throw deep if they had any desire to do so. But the wide receiving core has a number 1 starter of Stephon Diggs, with the ineffective Mike Wallace moved on, and draft pick Laquan Treadwell, who is in all likelihood not ready for this stage and one for down the road, if ever. Plus, Bradford hasn't really shown himself to be particularly effective as a slinger, hurling the ball downfield either. I don't think they're throwing deep. I think they'll be the same as last year. Zimmer is going to have to continue to work his defensive magic for this team to remain a contender on a unit that's hoarded youth and depth in the secondary, has young linebackers, but is starting to creak in other areas. It still has good quality starters such as Everson Griffin, Harrison Smith, Xavier Rhodes at corner. The tackle position is maybe the biggest area of concern, and the Vikes will still be pining for the old days of of the Williams wall. The window isn't going to be here long for the Vikings, and that's why Sam Bradford is in town. The bad news is the exceptional circumstances that hurt the Packers last season are no longer in place this year, and as a division winner, they have to face Carolina on the road and Arizona at home, on top of the powder puff schedule that the North will face. But for a team that was already borderline for me when fully healthy, it's these margins that can sway things, and I think their out-of-division schedule certainly takes them out of the race for the division title. The bets I'll place in this division, I will be max betting Green Bay to win the NFC North at 4-9 with Betfred. I think the Chicago Bears look a reasonably solid bet at odds against to finish 4th in the NFC North with Bet Victor. I will also take under 6.5 total wins this season for the Chicago Bears. I'm going to take a punt on Detroit to win a wild card if the offensive production is real with them. I think 7-1 is a decent bet, and I will play under 35.5 total points scored this season for the Minnesota Vikings. That's within 10 of what they scored last year. I don't see last year's game plan changing much. They aren't going to start slinging the ball around, and the schedule isn't that bad that I don't think they'll be getting into a shootout with many teams either. And that was the best I could come up with for the Minnesota Vikings. That completes our NFC preview for today. Check back tomorrow for the AFC. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, give me a follow on Twitter at Dansports.tips. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen in the NFC North this season, and I will be back tomorrow with the AFC previews. See you later.